Joining us this morning is Mark Sabah. He's Director of UK and EU Public Affairs and Advocacy Committee for Freedom in Hong Kong Foundation. Good morning to you.
Good morning. How are you?
Very well indeed. Thank you very much indeed. Liz Truss, I mean, she was derided as being a nonsensical politician, that she got it all wrong. Actually, I quite like what she's saying. She's back onto the stage. We can talk about why she's doing that. What did you make of her speech?
Well, actually, she's been incredibly consistent. What she said at the IPAC conference in Tokyo has been exactly the same that she's been saying for years. She has, as Foreign Secretary, she was very tough on a rising China and a weakened UK in being unable to deal with the rising China. What she said was just the natural world stage for what she has been saying for years. And the fact is, it was a stage that had a former Australian Prime Minister, a former Belgian Prime Minister, and members of the European Parliament, members of Taiwan. And they all reflected similar things. The rise of authoritarian countries where we are now is on the march. The democratic nations are shrinking. I think Guy Verhofstadt, the former Belgian Prime Minister, said that in 2012, 45% of the world's countries were democratic. In 2023, it's 20%. Authoritarian countries are learning from one another. They're working together. They use the UN as a meeting space when other Western countries won't give them a platform. And so China is the biggest and the strongest. It's doing deals with Putin. It's doing deals with Iran. It's doing deals with countries that we are uncomfortable with. And what that means is that they are on the economic and political rise around the world, and we haven't got a coherent China policy. So much so that this week, the Foreign Office invited the governor of Xinjiang, the region of China where there is a genocide taking place against Uyghurs. They invited him to the Foreign Office to give them an update on what's going on. Now, the man has been banned from the US for his actions in Xinjiang. It's been called a genocide. He's the overseer of that region. What on earth are the FCDO doing, inviting him to London to speak? Yeah. And this lack of a China policy is the biggest problem.
But also, what have we been doing as a country? If you remember, and you know far more than I do, but of course David Cameron and George Osborne issuing in that golden era of relationship with China. Also Rishi Sunak himself, he declared the golden era of UK relations with China, and saying that actually we need to be friendlier with China, we need to have closer cooperation, allow Chinese interests to buy British businesses. Yeah. What have we been doing?
Well, first of all, let's separate China from the CCP. So there's nothing wrong with trading with China. There is something wrong with allowing government-funded bodies or government organizations like Hikvision, TikTok, Huawei, these sorts of companies access to our critical infrastructure. So do we object to having students from China coming here? Of course not. Is there a problem when they request our data from research findings on serious issues like spy or nuclear technology, but they won't share it back in return? That's a problem. And so the golden era that David Cameron began, I, like everyone else, at the time of the 2008 Olympics, thought this is amazing. It's a new opening. It's a new beginning. But it was the beginning of a new crackdown in China. And unfortunately, we haven't paid attention to what China has been doing at home and abroad. And so some of the people are still in that mindset of a golden era, whereas others like Liz Truss have been shouting for a few years now, saying, start waking up to what's going on.
You see, I find it absolutely fascinating that in government they allowed Hikvision cameras to be installed in various government
It's unbelievable.
bodies. It is absolutely unbelievable.
And it's amazing that our partners in America and Australia have banned cameras from government departments, and we're still having a conversation about it.
And Liz Truss is not alone, is she, in terms of, you know, big voices within politics who speak up. You know, we have Ian Duncan Smith, who has actually...
I'm glad you brought him up.
He's been speaking about this for many years now, and he's been warning us about this. So why are grandees of the Tory party, who are well respected, and he is well respected, just being ignored?
Well, I mean, he said we've got to stop kowtowing, I think was his exact words, to China.
And I would like to add, it's not just Tories. You have Lord Alton, Baroness Kennedy, David Lammy. This is not a party political issue. The issue of our national security and critical infrastructure is not a party political issue. And I think it's wrong, those people who start to say the Tories are pushing this or Labour are not doing enough.
That's a good point.
It's actually a completely non-party political issue. And the same goes in America, where you have the Democrats and Republicans sitting on the new Select Committee on China. There's no country on which this is along party lines. It's an issue of those who think that we should push trade and money ahead of national security and global security. And Liz Truss is one of the voices which, believe it or not, whatever you think of her as Prime Minister, she's absolutely at the front and correct in raising these issues.
I mean, it's extraordinary. You know, even the ex-head of MI6, I think, Sir Alex Younger, has said we need to wake up and realise actually what we're sleepwalking into.
So why are we not waking up?
Business and money. And that's it. The United Kingdom was hit very badly in 2008-9 with the economic crisis, from which we've never fully recovered.
No.
Then we had Brexit, then we had COVID, and now we have a war in Ukraine. And at each time, the British government and the British economy has barely had time to catch its breath before another major economic crisis, and we need jobs. We've become addicted to cheap goods. We become addicted to disposable fashion. We become addicted to our mobile technology. A lot of it is made in China. And China owns the mines, which mines the products which go into our phones, and it owns the chips and so on and on. And it allows it this power and control using economic leverage. Now, China has a policy of non-interference. Don't tell us anything about what we are doing. But they love getting involved in what other countries are doing. They love telling other countries, you can't do this and you can't do that. But God forbid anyone say to a Chinese authority, you can't do that, and suddenly it's a threat.
So I read a book a few years ago called Hidden Hand. I don't know if you've read it. And it was horrifying, David. It was actually, if it's to be believed, obviously you have to take all books as being written from the lens of the author. You know, China had a plan, which they started 30 years ago, how they were going to actually make this march across the world. And we've actually, it's been there, it's in writing, it's clear to see, and we've sat back, and we're not alone. Lots of countries have done it. And they're actually well into the implementation of that plan. Anyone wants to read that, it gives a good idea. It's a heavy read, but it gives a good idea of what's been going on.
So just going into the detail of Liz Truss's speech, so she's highlighted this. You said right at the beginning she's been clear and consistent, and actually I think that's where she's really good. I think that's her forte, actually. But just in terms of what she said, she sort of essentially was saying we need an economic NATO, didn't she?
Yeah. Now, the idea of that is that countries should get together to use a system of combating individual countries economically, so that where China will threaten a country by saying we are going to pull out trade or we will cut off supply, the other countries will rally around and cover that shortfall and actually say, well, if you cut it to them, you're going to cut it to us as well. So imagine if NATO was able to say to China, if you threaten the UK by pulling out from such and such a project or withdrawing your investment, you're going to have to pull out from us as well. And of course, they never will.
And interestingly, she went on to say the G7 and its allies represented more than half of global GDP, and that, as you say, they should use their economic weight to make decisions about who we trade with and what terms we trade.
That's right. I mean, I would say the same goes for issues like Qatar or Saudi Arabia attempting to buy football clubs in Britain.
Well, we spoke about that very subject this morning.
At some point, you have to turn around and say, no, we do not want money from these places. We cannot spend so much time talking about equal rights and LGBT rights and women's rights and then allow a football club to be bought by a country that doesn't allow those. And the same goes with China. We cannot allow ourselves to keep saying we want more from China, more trade, more business, and then say, oh no, but it's okay that they have Confucius Institutes which bully and beat Hong Kongers. You know, China has a British citizen, Jimmy Lai, in prison at the moment. He's a British citizen. The British government will not say his name publicly.
Why?
Because if they do, they have to do something about it. Now, the FCO know all about him. They've had meetings with me and with, you know, his family members. He's a British citizen. He's been in prison for 2 years. He used to own a pro-democracy newspaper called Apple Daily. That newspaper was shut down. 6 of the news editors and journalists are sitting in prison. Most have claimed that they're guilty of ridiculous offences because they want to get out. Jimmy Lai, being one of the most famous and rich men in Hong Kong, is standing firm and saying, no, I'm not going to compromise myself. And his trial has been delayed again. He's in prison for another 9 months without any judgment against him. And this is a British citizen.
So why is the FCO not doing anything?
I mean, it's a great question.
I think it is a great question. I think also they're very sensitive about saying anything that might upset China.
Exactly right.
What about upsetting letting British citizens?
But China is a whole world.
I would agree. And in fact, I would go further and I would say that every British business that has staff out in Hong Kong or China at the moment should be aware and should get a health warning saying that if you get in trouble because your contracts are not respected or because your staff are drawn into nonsense charges, we're not coming to help you.
And that's true of Hong Kong too.
Hong Kong, absolutely.
Yeah,
Hong Kong is ground zero, is the testing ground. You know, the reason people don't think of Hong Kong as this front line in the battle against the CCP is that no tanks have been used. It's all been done using legislation like the National Security Law, which is so arbitrary that there are 3 words called reason to believe. We have reason to believe you are, you know, causing a riot. We have reason to believe you are a spy. Bang, you're in prison. And the British judicial system has been, which was used in Hong Kong, has been completely subverted. This term lawfare, the law is being used to attack citizens instead of protecting them.
So what I find really interesting is Liz Truss back on the world stage or UK stage, obviously, and her position is very different to Rishi Sunak, and his position is very different to the head of MI6, for example. Do you think he'll change his position?
No, I mean, Rishi Sunak became hawkish, if you want to call it that, on China during the election campaign against Liz Truss. In fact, on the week of that extremely long process of choosing who would be the next leader after Boris, I was in Washington, D.C., and I was at the State Department meeting, and somebody said to me, Rishi is China's guy, isn't he? I mean, that's how he's viewed. And suddenly he became really tough on China. But at the same time, he doesn't want to classify them as a threat. He wants to say they're a competitor. Now, a competitor is fine. We're competitors with France, Germany, Switzerland, Sweden, America. I don't feel threatened by doing trade with France or Germany or Sweden. They're not sending warships or planes or beating up Hong Kongers on the streets of England. They're not donating money to political parties for infiltration or any of those issues. And if you want to see how it's going, all you have to do is look at Russia between 2010 and today. I spent 6 years working with Bill Browder on the Magnitsky campaign, and for 6 or 7 years, we went around telling politicians around the world, Putin is going to end up in a war situation. Please pay attention. It's fine. There's nothing wrong. He invaded Georgia. It's nothing to do with us. He took Crimea. It's nothing to do with us. He shot down MH17. He provided gas and weapons to the war in Syria. And each time, we as the British government and other governments said, it's not our problem. Suddenly they invade a European country. Suddenly our energy bills go up. And now we're all ready to sanction, and demonize. Well, we've been saying that for 6, 7, 8 years. We're at the same process with China. The right people around the world, from academics, think tanks, political people on all parties, refugees from those countries are saying, please pay attention to what's going on. Why are we waiting for a war in Taiwan when we lose all of our microchips and our phones don't work and our computers stop working before we're going to start paying attention?
Chilling stuff. Thank you so much, Mark. That's Mark Sabah, who's Director UK and EU Public Affairs and Advocacy Committee for Freedom in Hong Kong Foundation.